Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel, Rayo and Tech. I hope that everyone's having a blessed day. We are back again with another video for my CYB-515 course. On this topic, I'm talking about the applications of security principles. Yeah, it's going to be a really cool topic. I have a lot of really cool information to kind of give you some information about why cybersecurity is important. So if you guys like the content, please like, comment, subscribe. Other than that, let's get on with the video. Let's go. First things first, we start with the 4 security designs failures to remote work. Clearly, we see now, especially with COVID and the pandemic which we're in, we have transitioned more into remote work. Even though it is very nice to work remotely, there are still different types of security flaws which could occur. So the first one is no proper authentication. So one of the biggest things with this is a big security breach could occur, especially with least privilege. What that means is that if the user isn't authenticated, then someone could be able to actually sniff those credentials out. And once those credentials are sniffed out, then someone would be able to use that to try to gain access to sensitive information. So as we can see that with remote work, if you're not really secure, this could happen. The second security design failure is data encryption, if there's no security for that. Usually it really just depends on which data you're working with. Let's say if you're working with a company's database, and if you're not on like a secure type of network, then that data could actually be vulnerable. And so an example of a type of bad actor attack would be called man in the middle, where someone would be able to sniff the actual network traffic itself and then be able to try to confiscate that data. So it's very important to make sure that's something you need to watch out for. Number 3, insecure devices with no proper endpoint detection monitoring. What that means is usually with remote work, there's a lot of cases where people use their own devices within remote work, and this is very unsecure, especially if these devices are not protected as well as updated. You could possibly be adding and creating more vulnerabilities within an actual network itself if your devices are insecure. In relation to relation to number 2, poor virtual private networks. So VPNs are pretty much encrypted tunnels where you're able to encrypt your network connection. So if you don't have a proper channel within a VPN, you could be possibly having data which is exposed on an actual live network traffic. And so it's very important that you make sure that whatever VPN you're using, make sure that you also have another form of authentication as well. A note here, based on a reference article which I found, we see that home-based work increases exposure to cyber risk because individuals connect through less reliable and unsecured internet connections. Employees working from remote locations can access corporate networks using personal devices. Connected or logged on devices can get into the hands of unauthorized individuals through sanctioned channels. In addition, social engineering attacks against employees and their families and honest mistakes are made within the new workflows. Shikanda, 2021. Very great article. So it kind of gives you some insight of what can really happen, especially within this new work of remote work. All right. So the next thing is the 4 security design failures to not working in general. So this is very important. So let's say if you're not working, one of the biggest things is the lack of security training and awareness. So this is very important because we do live in a world where cyber attacks do occur. A lot of people assume that their devices are safe. So if your device isn't really up to date, then that's just a lack of awareness of security. So that can definitely be a very big design failure. Once your device is breached, we see that if there's no real cases of incident responses on these actual devices or software, you could potentially be harboring some sort of malware which is on the actual device itself. And so it's very important to understand that when you're working with data and information and software, to always update your software. Number three, depending on the system, some devices may actually be out of date due to outdated technology and legacy systems. So let's say, for an example, if you're working with an older type of like Windows computer, which can only go up to Windows 10, that's an example where it may be an actual outdated technology where there won't be enough security policies and patches as well. So number four, no updates, no up to date patches and updates have been established. So, as I've mentioned, this can actually create more of an actual harbor for vulnerabilities to actually occur. So, it's definitely important to make sure the devices which you're using are secure, as well as make sure that patches have been implemented as well. So, the next topic we're going to talk about what is the CIA triad. So, in cybersecurity, CIA triad can be known as the three: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You got to make sure that information is confidential. You want to make sure that it's sensitive information is not exposed to the public, because who wants their information to be leaked? That's definitely not good at all. Integrity, the information which you have, you got to make sure not only is it secure, but it's also right and accurate. So there comes an integrity when you trust your information to these companies to make sure that they are able to keep your information safe as well as keep it like protected and valid. Lastly, with the availability of it. So we can see that since there's a lot of different types of architecture, let's say like the cloud type of architecture, making sure that the availability of your data can be accessed when you need to, but make sure that it's not available to unknown users as well. We can see that the CIA triad is usually accepted as the foundation for information security, the Ling 2014. So as I've mentioned, it's very important to use this CIA triad. With the increasing commercialization of cybercrime, many businesses are moving from a compliance approach to a broader risk mitigation and data protection strategy. Prioritizing business critical assets is essential in devising an effective security risk management program. MSAID 2018. It's very important to understand that in the world of business, you have to make sure that you have security risk and risk assessment in case of any of these type of attacks which would occur. So being able to have that definitely helps mitigation. It helps not only save time, but it also helps save money and resources. All right. Even though the CIA triad is the standard for security, there are, however, security failures of the principles of the security triad. So we'll first break it down with confidentiality. Number one, unauthorized access due to limited permissions as well as to access controls. So one of the biggest things here is that even though confidentiality is big, you want to make sure that access isn't granted to unauthorized users, because if they do that, that can result in the second step, which is the potential data breach. So with data breaches, we know that there's different types of malware attacks which could occur, such as like a DDoS attack or a phishing attack or a lot of social engineering type of attacks to be able to try to gain information. And this is definitely very scary because this can cause a lot of financial hardships and a lot of catastrophic damages to these type of enterprise companies. Last thing that I mentioned is social engineering tactics, which are used to gain confidential information. One of the biggest tactics is known as phishing. Phishing is when someone uses a spoof type of either like a email or smishing, which is using SMS messages in order to try to trick someone to click on a link to actually access and gain information from there. So this is definitely something which is very important, especially we can see in the CIA triad. So the next one is integrity in terms of the security failures. So as we know, we want to make sure that our data is safe. We also want to make sure that our data is accurate and correct. So some of the security failures which could occur within the integrity of the CIA triad, one is potential tampering of the data. This is very bad because if the overall data is compromised, it will definitely compromise just the whole integrity of the data itself. And you don't want that to happen because you want to make sure your data is secure and accurate. So we see that there's definitely more types of attacks which could compromise the overall integrity of the data. So an example is if you have a database with users' names and password, if there was a SQL injection, what someone could do is that they would be able to use SQL commands in an actual input field to retrieve sensitive information. From there, they could be able to do a lot of bad damage. So you definitely don't want that to happen. So the third thing we see is that unauthorized access. An example is that was like the SQL injection and a lack of version control authorization. So when I think of version control authorization, I think of GitHub. One of the main reasons why GitHub is very important is that we see with version control, you're able to not only track any changes which are made, you can also track different changes to files. So if you notice that someone has potentially breached your network, you can start seeing different changes which have been made to actual files itself. And that's very scary. So it's very important to understand that these are some of the common uh, flaws within the integrity portion of the CIA triad. Lastly, we have availability. So as you know, you want to make sure that your information is accessible to you at any time, as well as it being safe. However, one of the biggest security failures we can see are that different types of malware attacks can actually disrupt the overall access to some of these resources and services. So, an example was a DDoS attack, which is known as a denial of service attack, distributed denial of service attack. So, what that would do is it would be able to actually flood a network itself. And depending on whatever service you're trying to use, that network not only will be flooded, but you won't be able to actually use that service. And so, if a bank's network is DDoS attacked, then potentially users won't be able to access their banking information. You can see how that's very scary to a company. So, potential actual network failures have redundancy that can easily breach weak network architectures. So, if a network is down, that shows that a network could continuously be breached. And whenever something is breached, it takes time not only for the risk assessment, but as well as the whole risk mitigation as well. And that takes time and money. Lastly, in terms of availability, if a company is only using a single cloud service provider to maintain sensitive information instead of actually spreading it out across different platforms, if that platform were to potentially be breached, that could cause major damage because it's definitely important to have like a multitude of platforms which are used in order to not only just increase security, but it also is like another fail-safe type of mechanism as well. All right. So, in terms of the design principles which are needed for remote workers, I've come up with a list of 6. The first is the use of multi-factor authentication. So, multi-factor authentication is very important because it helps verify the user to the actual platform which you're using. So instead of you just naturally signing on with the password, what it would do is it would make sure that it will send probably like a verification code to something which you own in order to confirm the identity. So that's very important because it adds like an additional layer of security. Number 2, implementing the use of a zero trust model for overall security. So what a zero trust model is that you could see that based upon whatever device you're using, you got to make sure that if it's an unsecured network, you can't trust anything from an unsecured network. You got to make sure that you are covering all of your ends whenever you are connecting and using different networks. Number 3, limiting the use of networks to only certain employees for higher access. This can be prevented using, well, this could prevent privilege escalation for sensitive information. It can be established with access controls. Pretty much what this means is that whenever you're connecting to a network, depending on your actual role you are within the company, you have to make sure that there's different permissions which are set. So you can't have a low level employee try to access like the core of the network itself, because if that low level employee's information were to be breached, then potentially this could be another attack vector which could be able to actually access sensitive information within a company. So probably like administrators and managers which should be able to only have access to more higher levels of security within the network. So that can be established with actual access controls. Number 4, we can ensure that all devices with endpoints are updated and patched, as well as have antivirus software. These devices need to have encryption as well as sensitive. Well, they need to have encryption for the sensitive data. So this is very important because we see that in terms of antivirus software, this is a very cool tool where it helps you detect any software which potentially might be on your actual device or software which we're using. You can use something like Malwarebytes, which is free on the App Store as well as Google Play. It should be able to help scan your device to see if there's any vulnerabilities within there. So just making sure that like you update your software is very important, because what these patches are for updates of software are potential breaches which can be prevented if you are to actually update your software. Number 5, the use of virtual private networks to secure the overall channel and traffic data when connected to any public network. So it's very important to use VPNs, especially when you're working remotely. The reason for that is that when you have an encrypted tunnel and you have an encrypted connection as well as layering on top of multi-factor authentication, what it starts to do is you start to add more and more layers of security onto what you're using. And so being able to have a trusted VPN, being able to have multi-factor authentication is very important whenever you're working remote, so you can be able to work efficiently, safely, and wherever you would like as well. Lastly, promoting more user awareness and security, especially when connecting to unsecure networks. This helps users identify any threats that may occur as well as take the proper mitigation risk as well. As I've mentioned, it's very important to make sure that this is very promoted in terms of user awareness, because being able to know what network is right versus what network is wrong can help you determine, and not only just determine, but it can also help you solidify a better and secure future overall in terms of working remotely. Lastly, these are the references which I've had, which I have from here. Be free to look them up. These are very nice scholarly articles. Other than that, yeah, that's just my quick little presentation. Whew. If you guys have any other comments, or if you want to see more content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Other than that, you guys have a blessed day. It's Ray on Tech. Have a good day.